onto AI. So these were also AI generated images. I asked it to create pictures of machine learning models, and this is what it came up with. AI is also like a pretty widely misunderstood technology. It's been around since the 50s, it's really old. But for a long time, it was only predictive, so it was good at like recognizing patterns, analyzing data, that kind of thing. And most of the apps that we use every day, or a lot of them, have some level of AI integration. So like Uber uses it to predict the arrival time of drivers, that kind of thing. And whilst it was like accepted that AI and machines would probably outpace humans with a lot of like A, rote labor and B, mathematical tasks, for a long time it was also assumed that humans would always like outdo machines in the realm of creativity. And like this assumption has been really like shaken and disruptive recently with the advent of generative AI models, which are like a whole new league of AI where they don't just analyze data, they can actually like create new things. So you have image generators, like the ones that I use to produce these images. And I used quite like simple image generators, like there are more advanced ones, and you can really work with them, and actually like getting it to generate the image exactly how you want it is kind of an art form in itself. But yeah, you have image generators, and then you have text generators like ChatGPT, where you can enter a prompt and it will like, return a whole load of content. And like, as I mentioned earlier, this is creating like all kinds of challenges because the internet is basically now being kind of oversaturated with huge amounts of content, and we can't tell like which, whether or not it comes from humans or whether or not it comes from machines. Interestingly, Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, has said that they kind of released it like deliberately a bit prematurely because they felt that to release it when it was fully developed and kind of unleash that on the public would be too sociologically destructive. So they released it like a little bit early so that they could get input and like feedback and keep adjusting and fine-tuning the model to basically be like more of a force for good. There's sort of like a philosophical challenge there, where like you want to be able to identify and reward work possibly that's been like made by an actual human. So you have like the strikes going on right now in America, which are a testament to that. But also when you can't really identify like who made something, it's very, very easy for misinformation to prosper. So you have deep fakes, which are like when people create like fake videos of people doing or saying things they never do, but you also just have this sort of like accidental misinformation. And like a classic case that happened recently was this like image of the Pentagon blowing up that got like, it went viral and it ended up being printed in like certain news outlets. I mean, very unsurprisingly, suspiciously, like the first place to tweet it was like a Russian news source. It caused the S&P to drop. And I think it was either by like 0.2 or 2, it must have been 0.2%, which is like not significant, but it shows the potential that these like AI programs have to just like wreak havoc. And you can have both kind of like deliberate and malign misinformation, but also these machines do something called like hallucinating, which is where they just like get stuff wrong the whole time. And it's quite funny, like even Google, when they launched their language model Bard, the advert that they put out showing like how great Bard was, like Bard makes a mistake in the text, and he like said an incorrect fact about like the Hubble telescope, and like not even Google noticed. So you have this like issue, AI is making the internet like less trustworthy. And as I mentioned earlier, like AI, blockchain makes it more trustworthy. So again, if you can sort of use the digital ledger to really like trace data and the provenance of data, you can use it to shift through that data or shift through images and see like where they've come from and which like from humans and which are from machines, or which are both, because there's like a level of collaboration between these things. And then the other really big way that like AI and blockchain intersect is that AI is like innately a very centralizing technology. So how AI actually works is that it it's always like a prediction model. So even if you're using like ChatGPT, and you might have the feeling that it really understands language and is like coming up with original thoughts, all that's happened, well, not all, because it's very impressive, but what's happened is it's like consumed just like such a vast amount of data that it can statistically predict what the correct word to follow the words that you have entered would be, and it just goes like on and on and on like that. So at the heart of all machine learning is data. And this data is like very, very expensive, and it's very hard to like operate it correctly. And most of the big AI models at the moment are actually like having legal cases or facing legal cases over like copyright disputes around how they procure data, which is like another huge expense in itself. So you need like pretty deep pockets often to acquire good data, but also you have to train the models on this data, and that is like unbelievably computationally expensive. So I think it's estimated that if you were to build ChatGPT-4 today, the cost would be just of training the data alone would be over $100 million. And the cost of the GPUs, like the chips that go into training it, is extremely expensive, all this stuff. And again, this means that like you can really only build a large language model if you are like a massive company with very deep pockets. So like OpenAI, which is funded by Microsoft, or like Google. And you know, this is sort of like almost self-explanatory of like why you wouldn't want just a couple like mega rich organizations to control the large language models and the data that goes like in and out of them. So like a lot of thought is from the blockchain community at the moment is focused on like how can we decentralize the construction of AI models. And so there's sort of like two main focuses, which is like how do you decentralize the data and how do you decentralize the compute, which is so expensive. So like one suggestion is that you have a decentralized marketplace where anyone who owns a GPU can basically like offer to use that GPU for the training services, sometimes at a small price, sometimes not. But another example is you do the same for data. So you allow data to be like bought and sold through marketplaces, which you know we've kind of already discussed earlier. And this is like especially valuable not only because it's you know decentralizing, but because AIs are only as good as the data they consume. You want that data to be like as diverse as possible. Otherwise, it will only be able to predict according to like very specific criteria, and it will often like produce inappropriate outputs. So this is like particularly critical with medical you know, devices or medical devices that are using AI, because if they don't have like a wide population input, they can often literally just like misdiagnose. So you could ensure the diversity of the data that the AI receives, like again, through a decentralized marketplace that would be like fueled and supported by blockchain technology. Both blockchain and AI are like in many ways very early, and it's very unsure like how they'll continue to develop or how they'll intersect. But it's just very clear that both will have dramatic ramifications for how we live our lives and how society will continue to evolve. Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so meme coins are crazy. So like the most famous meme coin is Doge, which was literally created as a joke. Where the guy, like, I don't even think they did it as an experiment. I think it was literally just like a private joke with like a bunch of friends, and it just caught on and it went viral. And now it stayed, like the value hasn't completely dropped off. Partly because it's been adopted, I think, by Elon Musk. So it has this like now affiliation with Twitter. And I think people treat it a little bit like a Twitter stock. So you'll notice like the value of Dogecoin now soars whenever there's like positive announcements about Twitter, and like tanks when there's negative ones. But also I think it's just like that thing where like once enough people agree that something has value, it like perpetuates. I mean, that would be like an example of like crypto being more akin to gambling. A question that like I frequently get asked is like if Web3 will like demolish Web2, and I don't think it will. Like there's still going to be parts of the internet that you like very much want to be Web2. It's just there's going to be like specific spaces that you really want to be Web3, and you have the same, like Web2 didn't eradicate Web1. There's still loads of parts of the internet that are just like static internet pages. It's just sometimes you want it to be more interoperable, you want that ownership distributed. Bitcoin basically is like catastrophically bad for the environment. So the Bitcoin network in 2022 alone consumed more energy than the whole of Sweden. But it's the only blockchain that functions like in that fashion. And so the like consensus mechanism, that's this like proof of work where everyone's using compute. Bitcoin is the only blockchain that still uses that specific form of consensus mechanism, and all the others have like evolved them to the point where you're not competing energetically in that way. There's loads of interesting use cases, like the Norwegian government started using blockchain to increase the provenance of its salmon. There was one company that I encountered in Georgia that was like facilitating the trade of fine wines, because like the wines were often treated as assets and the bottles are so like fragile that rather than like trading the bottles, they would trade like the tokens that represented the bottles so that you could like kind of reduce the damage or like the possibility of damage. The kind of core idea of the blockchain and of crypto is that you could provide a currency that didn't require you to trust the humans, because you could trust the tech and the programs and the infrastructure that was running on it. So, for example, you might not know who founded Bitcoin. It's like a pseudonymous either person or group of persons, like of people we literally don't know, that went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, and we know nothing about like him, her, or them. But commitments have been made about how Bitcoin will function that you can trust because of the way that the programs are built. So you can trust, for example, that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins, and that's actually like that level of scarcity is like a very powerful guarantee that even like fiat currencies can't offer. And I think I would also like flip the question and ask like, what currencies can you ever trust? Like we have a long history of governments doing things that have caused currencies to tank, of banks doing things with our savings that we would never have sanctioned had we understood or known. We also have a banking system that's pretty faceless. Most of us don't know the people making the decisions about how our money is spent. It's not always not always is it always more accountable than crypto. It's not to say that crypto is not mysterious, because it is. It is mysterious. It's just this idea that the locus of trust shifts from like individuals to technology. It's interesting because how much a currency is adopted in a particular country depends on loads of sociological factors. So firstly, like the history of that country, like Europeans tend to not be like especially fussed about cryptocurrencies because we've always trusted, or for a long time we've trusted our governments and the ways that they maintain the monetary system, but also like how much the government itself allows those currencies to proliferate. So the questions of like how fast cryptocurrencies will integrate is like largely dependent on things like regulation, and I can't predict how the UK government will regulate. But I guess what I would say is that I think that countries who decide to set very clear like guidelines on crypto make the environment like a lot easier, both for people who are like for it and against it.